Have you always wanted to know how to build a TCG deck? Well, in this video, we're going to teach you how. Welcome, Rebels. This is Mr. Maleficent here to teach you the basics of building a TCG deck. So if you start building TCG decks, you might think to yourself that you want to start with a character. Me, I like Maleficent. So you might think to yourself, well, why don't I just start building based on a character that I like? Perfectly fine. You can start with a character that you like and play against your friends and etc. Now let's say you want to go to tournaments though and have a deck that at least is somewhat competitive. That's where you're going to want to pay attention to the biggest word, synergies. So here I'm going to teach you some synergies in the first chapter of Lorcana so that you can kind of understand what cards you should be looking for in future releases and what cards really should be going into a TCG deck. I'm going to start off by talking about Captain Hook. So this Captain Hook card specifically calls out in it, when you play this character, you may return an action card named Fire the Cannons from your discard to your hand. Now, specifically this card, Fire the Cannons, deals 2 damage to a chosen character. Now, why you would want to put these into a deck, if you choose Steel, would be because this actually lets you search out your Fire the Cannons when it is in the discard. So you would play a Fire the Cannons, you can do 2 damage, you can play Captain Hook, get it back into your hand. If you still have 1 ink left, you can do a 4 damage in 1 turn just with Fire the Cannons. It is a great combo early game, and you know, it's a combo that's used in some of the higher meta decks with Steel nonetheless. Captain Hook is a rare card. You're going to notice a lot of the time with cards that have that searchability aspect that they will be more rare. So you may have to go and find some singles if you don't pull them in order to build decks like this. But even still, having just a few of them in makes your synergy so much better. If you think of it as Fire the Cannons as a common card, you should be able to have 4 in a deck. If you have even 1 Captain Hook, that essentially gives you 8 Fire the Cannons possible in your deck. So you want to just make sure you're paying attention to cards that call out other cards, because searchability is huge in all TCGs. With that being the first set of cards that we're talking about, now I'm going to show you the next thing that you should be really cognizant of. Tiny Tinkerbell, or Tiny Tactician Tinkerbell. This card specifically can help you draw a card. Draw support is always huge in meta for TCG games. You want anything that can help you draw cards in a deck. You never want to have your hand empty. So she would be, an attractive play, 3 cost, lets you draw a card. But here's the kicker. You can shift on Giant Fairy Tinkerbell onto Tiny Tactician Tinkerbell. Shifting in Lorcana works like this. You would actually just shift completely onto the card, a shift 4, so it would cost 4 to do that. Then obviously Giant Tinkerbell has amazing abilities in that as soon as she comes into play, you do 1 damage to each opposing character, and when you attack someone else's character and banish them, you get to deal 2 damage of splash damage, essentially, to an opposing character. You can clear waves of people's characters with a Giant Tinkerbell. So this is, again, a 2-card combo that you would have in your deck that you'd probably want to run 4 of each, bringing you up to 8 cards in your deck, and you could even run these 4 all together for a total of 16 cards right there out of your 60 card limit, which is the case for Lorcana. You have to have 60 cards in your deck. You can have more, but you have to have 60 cards. So you could get yourself up to 16 cards just with these alone and have some really good synergy working for dealing damage, dishing it out every turn to your opponent. So shift cards are definitely something that you want to pay attention to when building a TCG in Lorcana. So we'll move those up right now, and now we're going to talk about a couple more here. Songs. Songs are specific to Lorcana, and they are an action card that instead of just paying the 5 cost with your ink, you can have a character sing them. Tinkerbell herself is a 6 cost. You could actually have her sing either of these songs, Grab Your Sword or A Whole New World. It would tap her, and then you would sing one of these songs. Songs are good because you can get an action out without wasting ink. So songs are something you definitely want to look into when building a TCG deck in Lorcana. Now, if you want to take it a step further and we go down the synergy line, we said Tinkerbell can sing it, but let's go even further here with Ariel. Singer Ariel, much like many of the cards in the game, there are many cards that have this singer ability where they can sing higher cost than what they are. Ariel can sing 5 cost. So Ariel would be able to sing both Grab Your Sword and A Whole New World, which would make Ariel a great choice for pairing with a steel deck like this. This now would make your deck steel and amber. You can only pick 2 ink colors every time you build a deck, and that would be what you would make this deck out of. Ariel's ability to sing these 2 cards is huge because A Whole New World is a great card that lets you get a whole new hand, therefore draw support. And Grab Your Swords is a card that lets you deal out 2 damage to each opposing character. And that's also not a choosing damage, so that actually gets through Ward, which is an excellent card to have in a deck that is running steel. Another type of card that you're going to want in this deck, so now that we've determined we're using amber and steel, you'll want to look in your ink colors and see Bodyguards. Bodyguard Simba is a great card in the amber decks. Bodyguard Simba comes out, you can come out exerted, and then the other opponent has to attack into Simba before they can get to things like your Ariel or your tiny Tinkerbell or even your Captain Hook. But you more or less want to protect things like tiny Tinkerbell and Ariel because Ariel's your singer, and tiny Tinkerbell, while on the field, you're really only having tiny Tinkerbell out there for the purpose of shifting Giant Tink on. So a Bodyguard is great to protect those cards, to keep them on the field, to let you continuously play your hand the way you want it. If you lose Ariel, and you have been teeing up Grab Your Sword or Whole New World into your hand to use, and you lose Ariel, now your hands might be dead in the water. Similar thing, you've been queuing up to shift Giant Tink onto Tiny Tink, and then Tiny Tink gets killed. It might mess up your whole hand and your whole ink strategy. Another type of card that you'll want to use when building TCGs is you want to pay attention to items. This item specifically with Beast's Mirror is draw support. You can tap it and pay 3 ink, and if you have no cards in your hand, you can draw a card. Like we said, you don't want to not have cards in your hand, so Beast's Mirror can help you get out of that in the steel realm. You want to make sure that you're looking at your items for things like draw support, and one other thing, Lantern. You tap Lantern and you get to pay 1 less for the next character you play this turn. That is letting you really use the economy of the game to help you with your ink strategy so that you can play Ariel turn 2 if you have a Lantern out. You could play Giant Tink for 5 cost if you did lose your Tiny Tink. So that's another key type of card you want to have in your TCG deck. So draw support, cost effectiveness is what I would call Lantern. Bodyguards, singers, these are huge to make sure you're putting in a deck. Most of the ink colors have draw support. Most of the ink colors have some form of bodyguard. Most of the ink colors have singers. Most of the ink colors have songs. Really, where you get into specifics is Amber is kind of your deck building for making things cost less. There's not a ton of it beyond Amber, so if you are looking to utilize that cost less mechanic and economic resource mechanic, you're going to want to put Amber into your deck. And then, in the case of Giant Tank and Captain Hook and Fire the Cannons, steel really is your go-to for big explosive attacks. Ruby can also do that, so if you are looking for a big explosive attack style play, you're going to want to look towards Ruby or Steel. It is no surprise that the top deck in the meta features most of these cards sitting right here and is called Steel Song. That deck is all about making sure you play your songs, your Steel songs nonetheless, with singers such as Ariel. And you have all the cost support and bodyguard support out of Amber to go along with it. So Ruby also has a high meta deck because of its damage. So that's really how you want to think about building a deck when you're building a deck in Lorcana. You want to make sure you can protect the cards that you have out for a turn to hold on for next turn. You want to make sure that you are utilizing this is, no other TCG utilizes this effect with the song and a character being able to sing it. So you want to make sure you utilize that. They wouldn't have put that into the game if it wasn't meant to be a big factor. You also want to make sure you always have draw support, and you want to make sure that you're dealing damage to your opponent to keep you in control of the board state. So if you go about with those main keys in building a deck, you should be able to have at least a decent core of cards to build around. If you just took this little list right here, you have 10 cards right here. If you took that and said, you don't necessarily want 4 of each, but let's say you did take 4 of each, now you're sitting at 40 cards out of a 60 card deck. Then you can sprinkle in other things that just maybe you like. Maybe you're interested in seeing how they do. But if you based it around a core 40 cards that do these type of things, you're going to have a competitive fun deck. And you're also, again, going to notice there's 2 super rares, no legendaries here in this small grouping. So you should be able to cost effectively build a competitive deck in this game without having to use the legendaries. Now, that being said, legendaries always boost a deck. Most of them are great cards, so you would want to find some legendaries to splurge into your deck. Specifically, if you're talking Ruby, the Maleficent Dragon is a great one, and specifically if you're talking Amber, you'd like one of the Stitches. So that's all I have to say for basics of deck building. I hope you found this really helpful, and I'm hoping that this helps those of you that maybe haven't yet built your own deck. Maybe you go online and you look up a list of a meta deck and you just copy that. Maybe you can get in a lab, get into your own lab and work on building your own deck based around this strategy, and bring it to one of your fun leagues and play it out. See how it does. I'm interested to see in the comments what types of fun decks people build, off meta decks that people build, and to see if this was helpful. So, quest on.